Welcome to another episode of Code for Thought. For this episode, I met with Dr. Emma Caron from the Alan Turing Institute and Simon Hedrick from the Software Sustainability Institute, both in the UK. Emma and I already met a few episodes ago in the Season 7. Back then we talked about how the landscape of data science and the roles in data science teams has changed over time. Roles such as community managers, data wranglers, developers and product managers, and a few more. And we heard from some of the staff at the Turing Institute in Part 1 who took us through their work in more detail. Starting with the Turing Institute as an example, Emma started to build case studies of what data science teams could look like. This is part of the Skills Policy Award project Emma has been working on. And so for this episode, I wanted to focus on what it takes to build more diverse data science teams and get all the different roles the recognition they deserve. At the beginning of our conversation, I wanted to find out from Emma how the case study is going.
Yeah, the case studies. We have finalised this case study now, which is about the Turing data science team and the different types of roles that we have within our data science teams. And yeah, it will be coming out shortly. I'm sure you wanted me to say it's out now, but it actually isn't. So it will be out very shortly for people to read, and that will be advertised on our website. But I've really enjoyed doing that piece of work because I have been able to speak to all of the different teams at the Turing. It's been a very collaborative effort from all of the different teams, and they have worked with me on editing the different personas for the roles that they have in their teams. It's a lovely sort of collective bit of work to show what we do at the Turing in terms of our data science teams. So I really hope it's going to be a really good case study for other people to look at. And again, I want to say that we're not saying we're the best at doing this. We're saying this is the way we do it. And we want to open the question, like, how do you do it? And I really want to see other institutes doing the same thing, documenting how they are working in data science teams, because still working in a very interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary way, bringing together all these different domains into data science, working very directly with data science specialists is a new way of working. And there are not that many organisations that work in very big teams like we do at Turing and in very, very interdisciplinary ways. I would love to see some other examples so we can kind of compare and contrast to our example.
So that was my next question, actually, what the future of this case study will be. So once it's published, which, as you said, will be very soon from the time of publishing, or even at the time of publishing, who knows?
It might be out, yeah.
So what is the future? So will you be adding further case studies to it from other organizations? Is that the plan with it?
We've actually just started a new project called the People in Data project, which is funded through this new stream of funding that UKRI and EPSRC have developed, which is not traditional research funding, but it is to fund communities in data science and also capacity building for research technical professionals. So People in Data project, it is focusing on, just as it says, people that work in data roles very closely with data, such as data stewards, data engineers, data wranglers that we have at Turing. And that project is trying to convene existing communities across different domains and different sectors that are data professional communities, talk to them about the different roles and the skills that are needed for those roles. So really, we're going to build on the work that I started and actually really build out competencies and personas for these types of data, specifically data science roles across different sectors and different domains. So we're just adding and adding to the personas we've already started. We know that there's lots of people working in this space already, so we're not going to reinvent the wheel in doing this all over different domains. We're actually going to just capture what's been done already and then map our new ones to the existing ones. But the other thing we're going to do in that project is around the professionalisation side for these data roles. We're going to speak really to the different communities and get their input on what are these really thorny challenges that need to be tackled to really move the dial forward in professionalising these types of roles in data science. So that could be things around working out how to have a career pathway in, for example, data stewardship. because at the moment that does not exist. And this is work that research software engineering community have been really leading on. So we are really trying to bring the type of work that the RSE Society and the SSI, the Software Sustainability Institute, have been doing around that research software engineering role. We're trying to bring a very similar sort of work for this data professionals roles across the UK. So the other thing that I really I think is a really big challenge in this space is diversity, because I'm a woman working in data science. I still go to conferences where I'm very much alone as a woman and it's very filled with men. And it is a very male dominated profession. And to be honest, that's not a great thing, especially in senior roles. It's very male dominated. So that is maybe something that as a community we could start to tackle, to think about ways of bringing women further up in their careers in data science, to expose them to the different types of roles that you can have. So yeah, we're really open to people contacting us about People in Data project, coming into our community to work with us on these thorny issues would be brilliant.
Last time we talked about the professionalization for sure, but also the recognition. So, and I wanted to home in on the definition, what we actually mean by recognition. So what does recognition look like? You mentioned part of it already, like a career path, but what else do you think belongs to that?
I really think it's about what we value as outputs and outcomes and impact of research. And predominantly or traditionally in research, that is a research article. That's what you are meant to produce as a researcher, or as an output for a research project. You produce a lovely, article to go in a journal. But unfortunately, that is what we are recognised for. When you go for jobs, they ask you how many first author articles have you written? What journals are they in? How many citations have you had? That is kind of the conversation you're going to have, or what you're asked to produce on your CV. But in a lot of these roles, that is not what we are producing. I do actually write quite a lot of articles because I actually really enjoy writing and produce a lot of research, or I work with lots of research projects. I'm not going to say I'm lucky enough, but I incorporate that into my role as a research community manager because of my particular research background and my interests. But that is not the interest of everybody that works as a research community manager or a research software engineer. That is not our primary focus, to write research articles. What we really need to do is to change or widen the focus of what is recognised as an output or as an impact of research, because we now want to make all different types of outputs really equally recognised, and that would drive forward the recognition of different types of roles. For example, I think it's incredibly important that people archive their data in a hopefully open, but mostly in a fair manner, so that it can be reused. But that process of doing that would not be asked of you in a job interview if you went back into a research, kind of traditional research role. And that's wrong, because actually we need to sustain our data. We produce so much data, and it's complete waste if people do not do that as part of the process of research. Really, this recognition of all different types of outputs of research being equal to that journal article is really important for these research roles then to become professionalised, because then you will be able to go for really in and out of different roles in research, not just staying as a community manager. You'd be able to go back into having a traditional research role, back into, I don't know, a community role, senior community role in the future, if all of these different outputs were equally recognised.
I find it quite curious, because in the industry, when you do a project, say you have a software product, an application or a library or whatever, it's usually recognised that you need a product manager, possibly a community manager if it's an API, for instance, that you want to publish. There's a UX designer very often, there's a project lead, a team lead, an architect. So there's all these different roles, sometimes a quality manager, and that's perfectly okay, and they do get a decent salary. But in science, we are in this curious spot where we have team science. It's interdisciplinary, and not only for data science, but also for other domains. So why do you think, apart from the publication that you just alluded to, do you think there are other reasons why there's such a discrepancy, why the industry actually recognizes, teams are multidisciplinary, they have to be, but in science, somehow we don't get it?
I think in academia, it's down to money. I think that's one of the drivers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that drives the whole world, doesn't it, money? So a lot of these roles that are now becoming specialized roles would have traditionally been done by probably a postdoc that was thought could do all of these different roles. So they would be the
Mm.
community manager, they would be the, the data steward, all of these sorts of things. They would take on and hopefully have the skills to do multiple things at once. They would be a very overworked person, very stressed,
Yes,
have
I
too
remember
much
that.
work and probably burn out. But yeah, I think it's down to money. But I think what's happening now is the kind of funding landscape is changing for research. As I said, we've got this grant, which isn't a research grant, it's about community building, capacity building in data science. I think a lot of these roles are being more enabled through changes in research funding for UKRI. And that's because actually the demands of UKRI, what they want us to do as researchers, is moving towards this wider recognition of different types of output. What is slowly happening in our sort of funding area is that it is moving towards this kind of team science approach. It is a slow process, but it is happening. So we do actually have to start thinking about how we actually bring that funding in to sustain these careers and sort of move them forward. But you're right, I think industry is leading the way at the moment. They have all of these roles already. They actually have very specialist roles. In this project, I've actually spoken to quite a few organisations, including Roche, the pharmaceutical company. They have very specialised teams. They want to be called certain things. So they have a team who are mathematicians, but then they have a team who are statisticians, and they cannot mix together. They are so specialist that they have to have these quite small teams, and they all kind of come together to work in a team. So they do have it all sorted out, but I think it's because there's more investment. It's about commercialization. So they have to do this sort of end-to-end research, and they have to have people who are specialists in different parts of that. Whereas with most traditional research organizations, we just focus on the getting the ideas and doing a bit of research, and often the deployment bit on the end doesn't actually happen. But I think that part now is actually coming into a lot of research organizations. I know at Turing, we really do think about the end-to-end process of research, and we really do think about deployment, how we can make greater impact, societal impact. You can't do that in your everyday work as a researcher. So there is now more need for these specialists coming in. So I think this is why a lot of research institutes, particularly, like the Turing Independent Research Institute, have really started to take on this capacity building in terms of building specialist teams, because they are thinking more about this deployment phase of data science. And I think it's something that's quite specific to data science as well. As you said, there's lots of product of data science. There's like the software, the data. We do have to think about how it's actually going to be deployed.
It seems like the dial is moving in the right direction in terms of recognition and professionalization, and yet it's stuck somewhere. In the last episode, you mentioned that what you would like to see is, apart from recognition and case studies and all of that, some action, a way of moving forward. Do you have any idea what needs to be done to move this forward and where it needs to happen?
Yeah, as I said, in this project, I've kind of tried to summarize the policy landscape that is existing at the moment. And I've already touched on this, the funding side of it. And that has been quite a significant move forward, that funding in the UK for research through UKRI has really changed. They have taken on a policy that was produced by the government around research and development. And they have built on top of it their own research culture policies, which really, it widens who can apply for research, it widens the scope of the funding for research, as I've already touched on, and it also widens the types of roles that you can incorporate into your project. And it also, there's another thing also, they've brought in a wider scope of a narrative CV, which I think is quite interesting, called research. And that actually puts more emphasis on a wider range of outputs. So I do think that the funding landscape, the government and funding landscape, have already moved in the right direction for what we're trying to make happen. And what I see now is there's an institutional barrier. I've heard anecdotally throughout my project that the barrier is I am stuck in a professional services role. I'm a data steward. I'm stuck in the library. They call me a support staff. I can't apply for research funding. And this is throughout roles in these specialist roles. If you are badged as a support role at a university or other organisation, you don't, in the institution's eyes, you're not eligible to lead projects and apply for funding. And that is a huge barrier to people and their career progression. Because in research, you really need to move from, your PhD, if you've done that, or graduate studies, to working on projects, to becoming more senior in projects and then leading projects. And if you can't start to apply for small grants as a project lead, you can't then apply for bigger ones. And, you just are basically blocked from the next stage in your career progression. So it is institutional system that needs to change. It is the definition of these different roles needs to be moved forward. So I very much and very strongly advocate for all of these roles that would be termed research infrastructure roles to be researchers or classified as researchers at any organisation now, because that unlocks all of these things and it means that they are not siloed within the support services area. Some people, they don't mind being there. They don't have any ambition to move in and out of research roles or, to progress in terms of being project lead. That's fine. But if that isn't unlocked, it means that nobody can move. So we need to really tackle it at an institutional level, get this institutional buy-in. So that it's really the HR systems have to change. We have to have conversations about why are you siloing people as professional services? What implications is this actually having on how your organisation works together? Because I think what they will find is if they unlock these kind of silos of jobs, it will actually mean that people will be able to start moving between different positions more easily. I think it will make research more impactful because, when they get to do things they want to do, they do more stuff. They are better in their jobs and they're happier. And they will see that there is career progression for them.
I've heard this now a number of times that, yes, there are the funders who are moving. There's the grassroots level. So we have the research software engineering community. There is something called the technician's commitment.
Yeah, and research managers as well.
And research managers as well. But then there's the middle layer, which is on the institutional level. So how would you influence and work with them? And what kind of actions do you think needs to be taken?
I think that's about us creating this evidence of how impactful these roles are. So that's something that we're obviously trying to do in this initial project, but hopefully in the People in Data project that carries on, we'll really be starting to gather this evidence and sort of case studies around how impactful these roles are. But we do have to come together as a community, people in these roles, and start advocating for this. We need to tackle people who are managing us and asking for this. We need to get the support of senior leaders at these institutes to start advocating for this way forward and start advocating for this change. And we do need to speak to these people in HR, these administrative people. But I think the first thing to tackle is to try and get the senior support at these institutes to make them aware of these problems. That's why I'm so excited to work with the Hidden Ref campaign, because they are really trying to have these conversations with quite senior people in universities particularly.
Is this where the case studies come in as well then?
Yeah, because I think the more evidence we can show, that's what these senior people want to see. I think they want to see evidence. They want to see how this has been impactful, how it's going to have a cost benefit for them. These roles will bring in more money because they'll be able to apply for more funding. At the end of the day, that gives them more evidence for their REF, for their research excellence framework. At the end of the day, that brings in more money for their organisation. So unfortunately, it comes back to money at the end of the day again.
Doesn't it always? Talking about Hidden Ref, because there is a Hidden Ref competition and because there is the next Hidden Ref or the next Ref, I believe in 2029, isn't there?
That's right.
So there's actually not just the case study and some ideas of how influencing, there's also more or less a deadline. What is it you actually hope to achieve by 2029? Or what would you like to see being achieved by then?
Well, as I'm part of this Hidden Ref committee, very much Simon Hetterick's fault that I'm doing that because he asked me to join in, because the work that we're doing at the Turing is really well aligned with the Hidden Ref campaign and I suppose the competition. So please do. There's a call for people to tell us the categories they want in the next competition. And obviously then there will be an application to apply. So I would encourage people to apply for the competition and you will get all the glory of being the best person in a hidden hidden role, I would say definitely join in that campaign. But as part of the hidden ref, we've started a campaign which is to move the dial on how much is put into the ref in terms of recognising wider outputs. So we want to move the dial. At the moment, the last ref had, I think, 2.5% of outputs that were put into the ref were things other than journal articles and books. Can you believe it? It's so
Yes,
low.
98%.
It's just awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
2.5%. So we're trying to double that to 5%. So that's, I think, ambitious, but not so ambitious, but I think achievable, I think was why we went for 5%. We would obviously love it to be loads more. But I mean, I would really love the UK university sector to really come out and say, we are going to take on this change. We are really going to embrace this internet ref. We are going to submit things from people that are things other than traditional researchers. We're going to put their outputs in there. We're going to put case studies into the ref. We're going to really go for it in this next round of ref. It's not just the wider outputs that you can put into the ref. It's actually allowed you now to put people other than traditional researchers input into the ref, which is quite a big change. So that's what I would really like to see is that the university sector as a whole is embracing this change and making it happen, actioning it.
As we've heard, changes are happening, and they are happening on multiple levels, at the grassroots level as well as the funders level. The community of research software engineers, together with the Software Sustainability Institute and the Society for Research Software Engineering in the UK, are a good example for how far grassroots movements can go. Incidentally, Simon Hedrick, who Emma mentioned in our conversation, is not only the Deputy Director of the Software Sustainability Institute, he's also the driving force behind the Hidden Ref initiative. Research software engineering, as some of you may know, started as a grassroots movement, which has grown enormously over the last 10 years, to the point that we're now having fast expanding RSE teams in universities in the UK and other places. So I wanted to find out from Simon how it all came about and how that can help all the other professions and roles to get better recognition for the important work they do for science.
So the idea of research software engineers came from a group of people. It's a concept with many parents. I'm one of them. But the role that I had was in identifying that we could do something really positive for the way that research software was used in research if we were to professionalize the role of the people who were developing that software. They were overlooked and unrecognized for the contribution they were making to research, and that was largely because their role wasn't recognized. It wasn't formalized in any way, shape, or form. With the Software Sustainability Institute, we started a campaign to get recognition of this term, research software engineer, and that was the bit that I did. So it started off workshops and talking to people and getting some media interest and trying to build up a bit of a buzz around this idea. And the reason that was important was that it gave us numbers. We saw this phenomenal growth of people who began to call themselves research software engineers. And when the numbers get to a certain point, then policymakers start to listen, universities start to listen about the importance of recognizing that as a career path. I'm much, much, much less of an expert on the work that research software engineers do and the amazing professional software engineering techniques that are employed and all the client management and all the sort of things that they do. But I am the expert on how that community was built. And I think that was the key thing for starting the conversation, getting recognition for that role.
And that's the bit that interests me, because we do have other roles such as technicians and now increasingly also data stewards, or sometimes they're called data wranglers. Yes, we do recognize they all are part of teams, but not recognized in research as such. So how can you transfer what you did for research software engineers? How could that be transferred over to other roles?
So my short answer to that is yes, absolutely. The longer answer is I'm also the chair of the Hidden Ref. So this is an organization I set up after many, many years working with research software engineering communities and society and all that sort of stuff. I stepped back because I really didn't want to become the sort of old hand who was making annoying noises in the background and talking about how we tried that in the past and it didn't work. No, I wanted to let the fresh blood in and then into the society and things. So I stepped back, but I still wanted to get recognition for these research roles. And one of the things I'd realized was that because of my work with building this community, other people were coming and saying, no, I'm a data steward. And we also have the same problems of no recognition, but being absolutely vital. So I coined this term, vital but unrecognized roles, with the hidden ref, which is trying to change the way that universities measure success in research and contribution to research. What we did was we started working with different people that we hadn't worked before. I'm a physicist, and I was suddenly working with people in like public engagement and exciting new areas like that. Every single new area we worked with, we found another vital but unrecognized role. It's incredible. And we haven't done anywhere near the entire research community, but every single time we broaden slightly, we'll find another role. Whether that is technicians and librarians, long-established roles who have been around for a long time and still don't get the recognition, or newer roles like data stewards, but also ones in the middle like trial managers and things like that.
Is that then similar to research software engineers? The reason I'm asking this is because research software engineers is a term that was coined actually in 2012 as part of a collaborations workshop at the time. But technicians and librarians, as you just rightly said, they actually exist for a while. They have existed librarians have existed for ages, and technicians likewise.
Would a technician by any other name smell as sweet? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
So yeah, what's in a name? So it was really important with research software engineers that they didn't have a name. So I did a study back in 2013-14 and looked at job titles for people who were doing software engineering in academia and found, there's 200 jobs and there's 100 different job titles. It was just a crazy place. So what research software engineering needed was a single title that everybody could get behind. I didn't particularly like research software engineer. Far too long. It's really difficult to say. And when you spend your life talking about it like I do, I can't think about how many times I've said that word. But what we needed was a single job title that we could get behind. And technicians and librarians already have that. There isn't overlap in the problem there. What there is overlap in is the lack of recognition. So a definition of recognition that is very, very narrow. And it's basically the number of publications you can bring in and the amount of funding you can win. And because technicians, librarians, and all these other vital but unrecognized roles don't have that traditional link to writing publications and writing grant applications, they're overlooked by a system that only sees those as the only measure of success. What we did with research software engineers is we kind of sidestepped that, and we made the argument that these people are contributing to research, but it's not measured via publications. It's measured via the software they provide, by the skills and expertise that they provide. And as that role blossomed and we saw the growth of it, then it was supported by the demand from the research community. As soon as they knew these people were around, they were desperately trying to recruit them. And we're starting to have a pretty major recruitment problem in research software engineering because the demand is so high. So what we need to do with technicians and librarians, I think, is the same thing, is to get that sort of recognition of value that isn't associated with publications and bringing in research funding. There's lots of issues around that. First of all, I have to say that with technicians, they've got the best support in the world from Kelly Veer and the Technician Commitment and then UKI TSS and all the various talent and everything that Ellie has really led. So they are making that case, but they've gone more from top down. So they've gone through getting universities to sign up to say that technicians are important and need to be recognized and valued. Whereas research software engineering was grassroots, it was bottom up. Get the community first, then argue for the changes to policy. So there are differences in our approach. The thing is that certain roles have existed for a long time, technicians, librarians. There isn't confusion over what that role is. There was with research software engineering. But what all of these roles are brought together by is that they lack recognition, and we need to change thinking about how these people are recognized. There's been an argument for a long time in research software engineering, and I see the same thing promulgated for librarians and technicians and all the other roles. And it's, well, if they don't get recognition, what we should do is we should name them on papers, and then they would get the recognition and we would start to value them. But personally, I think that's the wrong way around. Obviously, not against these people being named as authors of publications. I fully support that. I just think there's more to life than publications. And we should be looking at identifying ways of measuring contribution to research that isn't this narrow form of doing things that we use for academics and we've traditionally used for academics. And I think that should change.
So you mentioned also the numbers. So you got the numbers and you got the critical numbers. Now, since technicians and librarians are already recognized jobs and job titles, isn't there a case to be made that we already have the critical numbers that could bear some weight on influencing policies?
So it's one thing to have the numbers, it's another thing to have those numbers listened to. And I think that's the thing that the technician commitment and Kelly's work in general is doing for technicians. And, and you've got other groups, Research Libraries UK and CILIP and places like that, working to support librarians. We've got this very traditional approach within universities. I'll be very straight about this, right? There is the academics, and they're seen as important, and then there's the non-academics, and they're seen as supporting the academics. That's their role.
Putting it that way, yeah.
And maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but it feels very much to be that kind of very, very tight distinctions over those two different groups. And what you get is the academics write the policy. So they write it from an academic point of view, and it overlooks the contributions that are made by people that they maybe don't understand very well, possibly some of them don't value enough. So what we need to do is we need to have that community, but also have its voice listened to. For example, the work we're doing with the Hidden Ref is all about trying to get these groups together, to get them talking about the things that are missing from the way that they are recognized, and then feed that into the system that deals with academic recognition, which we focused on the Ref because it's the big one. But the idea is that this will trickle through into individual institutional policies, and they'll start having an effect at that level, because that, to me, is the important level. It's one thing to get a university a brilliant ref return, which is inclusive of all the different people who are contributing to the success. It's a very different thing to get yourself, as a technician or a librarian or whatever, the promotions and the recognition and career development that you deserve.
The final question that I have is, we do have these different groups. You mentioned the technicians' commitment, and then, of course, there's the research software engineering. Librarians also have representation somewhere. Is there a case to be made for all of these groups to work together more closely than they do already?
There's definitely a case for bringing together the different groups who are lobbying on behalf of a particular research community. I mean, that's basically what we're doing with the Hidden Ref. Right from the very beginning, we had this concept of you could be a supporter organization. All you would do there is you would help us communicate with your community so that they would get involved with the activities that we were running. The big one being the Hidden Ref competition this year. It'll be taking place, submissions open on the 27th of May. So do keep an eye open on our website for that. What I found when I've run various campaigns, and with this one, you would talk to supporting organizations. You'd say, look, so you're campaigning for this group of people, vital but unrecognized, as are these other organizations. Would you like to join forces? And nobody said no, and it's grown really rapidly. We have 20 organizations that's supporting us now, everything from the technician commitment through to the Royal Society of Chemistry, broad group of people. I think if you have to know a community to be able to represent it, right? So you need these individual organizations who understand their community and who can lobby for the changes that they require. But actually having another group like the Hidden Ref working with all of these organizations saying, look, this keeps happening. This same problem keeps happening over and over again, where we rely on a role but don't recognize it. And that limits the career aspirations for those people. It limits the skills that we can draw in. It limits the viability of that role, full stop. So if we could change overall our view on research assessment and what success means in research, then we would make this community far better for all of the people involved in it. And ultimately, we'll conduct better research because we'll have better skilled people within that community. So yeah, I think there's a huge argument for working across organizations that are supporting their own individual communities.
The case study that Emma mentioned and talked about at the beginning may well be close to being published when this episode comes out, and when it will, we will update the show notes with a link accordingly. And as you've heard from Simon, the Hidden Ref initiative in the UK is trying to bring the different professions and roles together and lobby for recognitions by universities and research centres. There's going to be a number of announcements regarding the Hidden Ref and the Hidden Ref competition in the course of 2024, so stay tuned. Finally, if you have some feedback or comments, you can now text me directly from the show notes in your podcast app. I'd love to hear from you. And finally, I would like to thank the Alan Turing Institute for their patience and for sponsoring this episode. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya!